you seeking guidance on your spiritual journey? Need help with a vexing problem? Missing a loved one and looking for answers? Look no further than Psychic Insights, a small trusted psychic service offering mediums, psychics, and spiritual coaching. This service is managed by Hollis Taylor, a gifted psychic medium, astrologer, and a compassionate coach. We are dedicated to helping you navigate your spiritual awakening. At Psychic Insights, we provide medium readings and psychic insight to help you plan for tomorrow and make choices for today. Find the support you need, compassionate grief coaching, and astrological insights to help you spiritually grow and transform. Our professional services include well-managed schedules, recorded sessions, and reliable psychic mediums ready to facilitate your transformational experience. Discover more at psychicinsights.life. Welcome to everyone. I'm Bright Hawk, and with the magic of green screen in the background, it doesn't look like I'm playing anything, but I'm playing a handpan, a hong pan art to be specific. And a lot of times when I start playing, I just start playing. I've been a musician my whole life, so people often ask me, how did I learn how to play the handpan? And it's like, I don't have to even think about it. It's very innate. The other thing I want to share about the handpan is that well, I always call it an instrument of the angels. I feel like it has an incredible way of thinning the veils. And a great deal of the music that I have composed, especially at the beginning of when I started playing handpan, was in hospice situations. First for my sister, Teresa, and then for my father. In 2006, I had one of those years that taught me a lot about death and dying. First, my brother-in-law, 53, he collapsed in the airport with his family all around him, had a cardiac event, ended up in the Seattle hospital, and I guess it was about 3 or 4 days on machines before it was like, he's not coming back. So I played music for my sister and my niece and nephew while they said goodbye. And I thought about how the last sense we have is our hearing. And there's something about being able to play music in settings that are so sacred and sensitive. When words fail all of us, but the vibration of music being able to bring peace to the heart. And to our family's astonishment, just 15 weeks after William passed away at 53, with a 7-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, and my sister, who was a 40-something, suddenly realize she was doing it alone. Welcome, folks. 15 weeks after William's passing, my sister Teresa, my oldest sister, I'm the youngest of 7. And she had cancer and had been dealing with that for 3.5 years. And at 51, she was gone. And a week after she passed, my dad collapsed. And we would find out that he was riddled with cancer. And 6 weeks later, he was gone. And I guess he was about 78. And each of them, I was able to play music for them. And I remember realizing that my experience of their passing was very different than anyone else in the room, because I was the musician for the boatman, as they say, for the trip across the river, as they say, to the winterlands, through the reeds. And when you're the musician, the musician is the magician, because it's all about vibration. Life, the universe, music, our existence is all about vibration. So I'm grateful to be able to bring my good vibrations to lots of different places and settings, and to this right here, right now. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. We're on a bunch of different platforms and pages. So however you found your way to us, thank you. I'm going to let Hollis introduce the flow of the evening. Do I have to stop playing so you can be heard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just trying to talk over. Thank you very much, Fredo. While it works in person, it doesn't work on Zoom. So, so I'm glad you're all here. Welcome. And I'm so thrilled to be doing this today, because our idea is, I just need to, I'm hearing myself talk back to myself. The idea is that we will join as a community so that we can give support and learn and get to know each other. I also do a learning circle, which is kind of like a place where you can come ask questions. I have over 30 years of experience in mediumship. I don't know. I've been doing it since I was a little kid. So I don't really know what to say, but I used to banish spirits and communicated with spirits my whole life. But I started doing medium readings when I was 25. I'm 49. I'll be 49 in 6 days. Um, and as a medium, since I was 25, by the way, the first person I ever gave a reading to, her name is Melissa Berger, I think it is on Facebook these days. But I gave her first reading, and she was my first reading, and she's happy to jump up and down and tell you how great it was. We're still good friends. Isn't that hilarious? Like, that's how we came together. That's how we became friends. And we're still friends all these years later.
That's awesome.
And she's in the group and she'll sometimes pipe up. And as a medium, there were a lot of things that I struggled with. Like, why do babies die? Suicide, things like that. So I spent a lot of time asking my guides what the answers are and meditating on those, because I'm also a yogi, Buddhist of sorts. I call myself a spiritual yogi first. Buddhism doesn't 100% work for me. And, I lead this group. I'm the admin of the group. And I thought, to build community in the group, to build a community where we can support each other. Because when someone dies in your world, whether it was your dog or someone you love, it's hard. And we need help and we need support with each other. And I will say that my path in mysticism has been the most transformational choices I ever made. So, everything from doing yoga and meditation to getting in touch with um like my tarot and astrology and all of those kinds of things, and even witchcraft. I have started witchcraft when I was 13, and I'm 49, so however many years that is, somebody else can do the math. That's not my strong point. I use calculators. And so yeah, so what is a witch? Just in case there's somebody in here going, "Oh my gosh, the admin of this group is a witch." Okay, that's absolutely true. I'd also call myself a pagan. A witch is just a person that gets in touch with nature and more worships nature or worships the cycles of nature than we worship a god. Now, there are some people that are into more like Wiccans, and they're more into gods and goddesses. And although I know them, some of them, it's not really my strong point. My strong point is the elements, doing spells to help yourself transform. I can also guide you in mental health stuff, everything from grief to trauma. My favorite thing to do, it's not mediumship. Well, it's a form of mediumship. My favorite thing to do in the whole wide world is an astrology death reading. When I see that meeting on my schedule, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I got astrology mediumship reading later today. I don't really know what to call it, so I just called it astrology with mediumship. But it's really what I'm doing is I'm tapping into the spirits always, because I always do everything I do right now here. I'm tapped into the spirits. I'm always being guided. That's the only way I can live. In fact, when I have to shut that down, I kind of go crazy. So don't take me into the city because I have to shut that down. And then I get a little crazy and then I just want to leave. So most of the time I'm being led by spirit anyway, which is what astrology requires you to have some intuition. You have to use your intuition. And I use astrology, the birth and death of your loved one, to determine, to answer hard questions like why now, how's that supposed to affect your life, and the relationship between you and them, soulmates, twin flames, soul contracts, whatever it is. And whatever you're supposed to learn from that death will be in the chart, and how to get over it will also be in the chart. How to move through it. So I don't know if you get over it, but you move through it. So out of everything I do, I made that reading up. It's mine. I don't know anyone else that does it. So I did see a woman teaching bereavement counseling through astrology. But that's it. I'm not sure it's the same. I'd have to go to her class to find out. So that's who I am. I'm the admin of this group, and I'd invite whoever wants to next, that's part of Psychic Insight, to kind of step up and say who you are and just introduce yourself, maybe give us a bite of your story. Go ahead. Just unmute yourself and go for it.
Go, Sarah.
Sarah.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm so grateful for everyone joining us tonight. My name's Sarah Redcrow. When I was a kid, I could hear spirits, more like a whispered conversation. I didn't really do much with it. It wasn't until November, November 26, 2021, where my whole world was torn to pieces. We caught COVID, and my oldest son, my only son, he tragically passed away from the complications of COVID. It happened very, very quickly. The day before, he was actually sitting up in bed. He seemed like he was getting better, and the next day, he just crashed. But like everyone who has lost their loved ones, especially the one that is so close to them, whether it be your child, your parent, your sibling, best friend, pet, you just feel like the wind's taken out of you. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's it. And then I started thinking, no, I'm not ready to say goodbye. So I learned how to say hello again. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just heard about the chakras and third eye opening. So me, because I'm kind of a wild card, I do it my way. It was actually Hollis that taught me about grounding. So the root chakra, I just went straight up to the top. And I remember being frustrated because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to do this meditation, and bam, it didn't happen that way. But again, after meeting Hollis, and they gave me the best advice, is to trust in myself. And slowly but surely, I was able to connect more. And then I started connecting for other people. That was a big part of my learning as well, to know that, hey, I'm actually doing this and I'm not just creating conversations in my head with my son. So with that, that's kind of how I got into this. And it's helped me so much every time each of you make a reading with me. It's such an honor to me that you trust me enough. And I love seeing your faces when you get that, like, oh, that is my person. And honestly, from your loved ones, how they're just as excited as you are, and they're just so full of love. So it's actually helped me a lot. I still miss my son terribly, but he also helps guide your loved ones. So with that, I always like to share. This is my Jonah,
Oh,
and how he shows me when he helps your loved ones come through. He kind of has them all up in a line, and he shows me. He looks like a bouncer. My son loved wearing fedora hats, so he has like the velvet rope, and he's like, "Okay, it's your turn." But anyways, I'm just so happy to be here, and I'm so grateful for all of you being here as well. So thank you, and that's kind of my story.
hello, and I'm Mama Cole, Cheryl, and I've had experiences pretty much my whole life. As a child, I survived some really traumatic stuff from like 3 to 13, and I had spirits who were my friends. I talked to them, I played with them, and I honestly for years thought that was normal. I like when I had memories, um, I often had companions in them. I knew before my grandparents passed and went and told my mom. Um, it wasn't really received very well. My mother, I do believe that my mom also had abilities, but they they frightened her. So I was often punished for some of my gifts. So I kind of pushed them down a little bit till about 13, and I had a friend who did practice witchcraft, and she actually scared me by moving stuff. Like I had some crazy experiences with that. So it kind of like I backed away again to like my 20s, lived in California, and had a psychic medium actually come to my work one time to do my cards. I'd never seen this woman. I'd never had, and it was really wild. And she was I came to find out she was like some famous woman. I'd only been in the town for a week. I was from New Mexico, never been, it was in the San Francisco area. And she came and she sat there and she said, "I've been sent by your guides to do your cards." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Like, I said, "I don't have lunch for like an hour, but okay, if you really want." And this lady sat in the booth for an hour and waited for me. Then on my lunch break, she brought me lunch, read my cards, and it was the wildest thing. Told me like all like basically what I'm doing now. And I was in my 20s. She told me I would be a psychic medium and that I would be um professional and all this stuff. And I was like, there's no way. And I blew it off. Um, about 5 years later, went to a psychic fair, same thing. I've only had my cards done like professionally or like ruins maybe 3 times in my life. And each time I was told like I had a torch and I wasn't lighting it, had all these abilities. It wasn't until my family started passing. Um, I was there when my grandma passed. My grandma was like my mother to me. And when Bright Hawk was playing the music and she was mentioning how she was there, if you notice, my tears were just flowing because my grandma, we actually played a CD and she loved Elvis, and it was in the garden was playing, and he walks with me, and that played as she passed, and it was the absolute most beautiful thing I've ever experienced in my life. Like I felt my grandpa come. It was like I was so upset because I lost my grandma. She was like my mom to me, but it was so beautiful in the same time. And that was when all my gifts really started opening slowly but surely. I would lose people. There were missing children in our community. Like I was able to use my gifts for the good. We did foster care. I had kids come up missing. I'd find them in like 15 minutes. I could tell the sheriff's right where to go. But I didn't know that I was a medium at the time. I just did these things like for about 20 years, but I never really dived in until I'd say about the good past 2 or 3 years when I started healing myself. And that's how I healed myself. Similar to you, Sarah, but I didn't have losses like that. Mine were uncles and grandparents and things like that and experiences. And as they started passing, they would come to me. When they found out what I did, they would start coming to me. And most of what I've learned, like Hollis, is from them on the other side. I have lots of books. I try to read books and understand past lives and, you know, the afterlife. I really wanted to know about the afterlife, like Hollis too, the suicides, the children, the babies. I still can't comprehend nor understand, but I still get taught from the other side. So I absolutely love what I do. I love, like Sarah said too, connecting. When I connect, I see them. I'd say it's kind of like a scream, but it's not. Like, I actually see the individual. I don't get names and stuff, but I get a lot of their characteristics and their personality and a lot of cultural things. I do get a lot of like cultural, they'll show me signs, symbols, and things like that. So that's usually how I work. And I do also work with locating the missing and lost and like forensic things. And the other thing I also wanted to say too was Bright Hawk, when you were talking about the music and reaching. Now, I've been very emotional since Bright Hawk played, but when you were talking about the music and how it worked with the hospice and stuff like that, I want you to know, because I experienced this from the medium point when Hollis's son was in a coma, you were playing. The messages that I was receiving from him were for you to go louder and whatever. And I remember he was very specific with certain frequencies and stuff. So I haven't had a chance to actually speak to you since then, but I wanted you to know that that music helped guide him back. So you needed to know that. So when you were playing that, I know that you get it from your point, but I wanted you to kind of because I had no idea that you had any of those experiences. And my stepfather, just another little coinky dink, my stepdad passed away in the Jacksonville airport the exact same way, but he passed in the airport. Yeah. So it's just wild how things work. And I believe as a medium too, there's no such thing as coincidences. They're all for us to learn and grow by. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Angel. I pretty much grew up with my giftings. That one area that I was somewhat fortunate as well as mixed blessing type of thing in some ways on was I was raised in a Pentecostal family. So at least there was some acceptance of gifts as being, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, but anything that didn't quite resonate with the way that the church decides it should be becomes an issue then with that. So it's kind of a mixed bag on that. But at least compared to some of the other backgrounds, which my family had originally been with a Christian Missionary Alliance church, which is much more like Baptist. So any of that stuff is totally considered to be something wrong. So I was kind of fortunate on that front to some degree. I also was blessed to have a grandmother who, her family were travelers, and that they mostly were in the South Jersey area, but they would, make wreaths for graves and things like that, and go door to door with those, and a bunch of other things that went along with that. And I remember as a child, she taught me how to use a needle to do pendulum work. And the important phrase that she taught me as well was, "Don't tell your mother," because she knew that Mom would not accept any of that stuff. So, so it's one of those things that, and Grammy is one of my primary guides on my journey. So I miss her a lot, but I also still, and I miss having her in physical form, but she still checks in quite regularly. And one thing I will say is, those of you that are looking to have connection with loved ones on the other side, we are now in September. That means we're heading into, and we've started and are heading on into that veil thinning times. And I remember the night that I actually had my first time of actually being able to really visit with the other side in a way that, because like I would have different experiences along the way, but my own miscarriages and such weighed heavily upon me. And it was not until the night that Crystal came and was there with me, um, just before Halloween. In fact, it was actually the night that was the anniversary of one of my losses, that I had was able to actually visit astrally with my grandmother and my children. And it was a powerful experience. And I wondered at first why I had not experienced that sooner. But it was explained to me why as well. They told me that I had to have someone on this side to anchor me, because otherwise I would not want to come back. And so they couldn't do a visit with me until I had someone on this side to anchor me here. So sometimes, because the grief and loss and the beauty on the other side aspects as well, and just, especially if you have health issues and it's a bit of a struggle for you, sometimes we tend to feel like giving up in general. And so if we're feeling that way, then sometimes it's such that we can't connect to the other side safely enough to be able to experience it quite the same yet. And so, but be aware that, things like that can happen and do happen when the time is right and when you have the proper anchoring and are emotionally ready for it.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Jamie Angel. And here we are. I'd like to invite anyone that has any questions, that would like to ask us about things, ask about the other side, ask about medium shelf itself. As you can see, it comes to us in different ways. Most of us read differently too. Like, some people are more likely to bring through certain types of details. I think Sarah's more about like physical characteristics, in my opinion, in my witness. And Cheryl, like me, will bring through a lot of personality things, but also Cheryl will bring through like the cultural stuff, like she said. And sometimes Jamie will bring through memories. And I usually bring through personalities and sometimes I bring through physical things. Sometimes I surprise myself.
Yeah, I love when that happens.
Someone asked a question in the chat. Let's see, I'm trying to get to it. Do you actually hear the person's individual voice, what they sounded like in life?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Not really. I don't. And I'll let everybody answer the question, because of course it's different for all of us. But in my experience, it's more like Sarah describes it, like a whisper. So I don't really hear their voice. I more or less hear their messages sort of as a whisper in the back of my mind, almost like a thought, almost like what we would call claircognizance, which is, some of you define having this, because a lot of us have this, almost all of us have this. I think everybody does, because I think you have to have it in order to communicate with your spirit guides.
Yeah.
And everybody has the ability to speak to their spirit guides. And so everybody has claircognizance. And claircognizance is what some of you describe as I had a conversation with him in my head, but I'm pretty sure I made it all up. Probably like 3/4 of you going, oh my God. Because
It's
we're
real.
human, and as humans, we want to take credit for what's in our minds because we're all a bunch of arrogant humans. I'm not saying you're arrogant, but all of us do take credit for what's in our mind instead of giving the credit to our spirit guides. And that's really where it's coming from, you know? Like most of the time, if you're just doing the dishes and you're like, I don't know, Joe. Let's say your husband's name is Joe. I don't know, Joe. I don't know what I'm going to do about the finances. I don't know if I should sell this house. And then you kind of hear in a way that he would say it, just sell this house. You don't need this big place anymore. And then you dismiss it because it's you making it up. But actually, it's not, especially when it happens very quickly when you haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about it. Okay. So that, that's how it works for me. I don't really hear the voice. Michelle says I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Exactly, because all of us have claircognizance. All of us, we have to, because we all need to speak to our spirit guides. And before Christianity happened, everybody talked to their spirit guides all the time, and nobody thought it was weird.
Yeah, it was normal.
Everybody did that.
I don't hear like so much as I hear like the style of language. Do you know, like if it's a proper English, like not so much accents, like, but I can tell like a person from India, to me, their dialect is different. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not so much of an accent, but it's like their word usage is different. Like that's how I hear, but I hear their voice, but I don't really hear a whisper. I can actually like hear like they're right in the room. To me, it's almost like when I first started, it was like a screen, and now I actually like can see and hear the people. So that mine's just a little different, which we all are different. That's what's cool. I love how everybody's abilities are totally different. And there's times I see like the glowing, but namely I can see their whole being, like their clothes, and hear their voices. So,
Well, because we're both pretty sensitive and we live together, obviously, what's very funny is now I'll hear something and I'll say it and I'll say, I think your guides are trying to tell me to tell you. And because it has a vibe or a feel to it that I'm like, I don't know where this just came from, but I know I'm supposed to speak this out loud. And then
you know
Hollis will be
what's
like, okay. Okay. And my grandmother will come through Hollis to me to let me know something. And I'll be like, oh, all right. Okay.
my husband is he's beginning of stages of dementia, and he gives me messages. It's the wild, just like what you said, it is the wildest. So he goes, oh yeah, I think we should be doing this. I'm like, okay, same thing. And his grandparents will come to me to check on him. So that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
I just wanted to say for myself, I notice when a spirit gets comfortable with me, their personality really pops up.
Yeah.
I had an older lady come through, and her voice, she really had that Brooklyn accent. Like I could hear it. It was like a thought, but I could hear it. And I noticed myself, I started talking like, oh yeah, I was like almost mimicking her, but not in like a mocking way. I got caught up. I do sometimes do a little bit of trance mediumship. And I know one time I wasn't meaning to, but I was in a meditation and I brought through a woman, because I said I'm opening myself up to spirit. My daughter was sitting beside me, and she said, I guess I said to her, in a very southern accent, my voice changed, really demure sounding, and I just said, "Oh, don't worry, child. I'm only here for a minute." And my my daughter, she's like, "Mom," and I was like, "What? Yeah, what?" But that's kind of how I sometimes hear spirit. I'll get the accent, and if they're really comfortable with me, I notice I'll start talking how they are talking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Channeling it, and that where it's flowing through you type of thing. So it
Yes.
naturally becomes adopted. For me, I kind of have it kind of varies depending on the situation and types of connections. I have sometimes where what I'm getting is more visual. Now, one thing, in case anybody isn't aware, I am deaf. So um, visual modes of communication are most common for me in things. I use sign language and such. But I was not always deaf. I did have hearing when I was younger. And so I have memories of how things sounded and things like that as well. And so, and many times I will have, where it's more of that, what you would call telepathy, because I'll have it with my spouse where we're in a different room from each other, and I'll yell out what what they were just thinking, or sometimes they'll be like coming and saying something to me, and I was just about to say that. So I'll sometimes have the same type of thing, what would be considered more like telepathy, or that just hearing it in your head type of thing. But there are other times where it seems almost audible as well, which is very, very odd, and something I take big note of when I'm getting auditory messaging, because for me to have it not feel like it's just in the head part, but feel like an audible message, that's when it's like, okay, yes, because not getting sound makes that so much more profound, um, type of thing. But like I say, sometimes, and what is very interesting is when you're working with a baby spirit that, generally they don't have speech when they're that age, and yet you can hear the thoughts or messages and stuff. And I had one recently that it was very specific the way the child said mom as opposed to mom. Now I had not remembered at the time that the person that I was working with was in the UK, but when I heard that, it felt so profoundly significant. I was like, wait a minute, are you in the UK? Because I swear I heard it as mum. And that person had, when they had written something at one point, had modulated to mom, MOM, which is what we use over here. So that had me a little bit confused, but it was so profound that hearing that difference was something that I had to check on. And yep, she was in the UK. And so that's why it was said that way. And so it was something important that it resonate. And sometimes things are not, perfect, but there are times where those details are the thing that are supposed to be expressed for a specific reason. So with those things, paying attention to those things that are not typical can sometimes be just as profound as paying attention to the things that, are just flowing through as well. Because when you're connected well, you kind of pick up on variations. And one thing with what I experience sometimes is also because I have so much visual, and sometimes I see the people themselves in their physical form. Sometimes I see an energy signature, their aura in that as well. And so if I'm seeing an aura, that may be a little bit different in the way I'll express it than if I'm seeing the individual details of the person's physique or what have you. A lot of times I'll get one or both. And for me, one thing that I will tell you happens a lot is I connect with animals oftentimes before I connect with their humans. So it's like, it's almost like the animals will guide me to where to go and that. And so if I connect with an animal, it's like, okay, are you the persons, or are you just somebody who's taking me along the journey? Because sometimes they're just in the same area type of thing. But paying attention to those things, the visuals also helps for me because I do communicate a lot visually.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for answering. And so the next question, which I thought was interesting, and I'm glad that we're going to talk about this.
Me too.
They go to different places, Sam says. So Sam says they're working with ghost hunters. They go to different places they believe are haunted. I have been to several of Hollis's talks and try to learn from them. What info I have retained from his is that spirits are energy, a vibration, and come from love. That's right. The people I met said, when I speak to my father that has passed, I'm conjuring other spirits, and it's not fair to not let them be in peace. I'm looking for guidance on this because they expressed to me that spirits are only the people I know, and ghosts are strangers and can mess with people, such as throwing things in haunts. Okay, so let's talk about this.
Wow.
First of all, your spirits around you and speaking to them, communicating with them, and everything that has to do with the other side is a matter of a belief system. Frankly, it's all belief, every single inch of it, because none of it can be proved. None of it. So it comes down to, what do you believe? How important is belief for you? What makes sense to you? And I used to work with ghost hunters, and I struggled sometimes because if I got things from the spirit that weren't aggressive or based in fear, then the ghost hunters didn't like what I had to say. They only wanted it if it was dramatic. And if it wasn't dramatic, then they would dismiss me as a medium. So I started working with another medium who often would exercise houses. And she was a teacher of mine. And me and her used to go around to houses and we would exercise spirits out of the houses. And those are ghosts. Ghosts are different than spirits. So let me speak differently. Spirits are people that you knew or didn't know, that are ancestors, that are around you, trying to guide you and help you through life all the time. Ghosts are people that have passed away, that are somehow connected or attached to the land, the space, or the item. Now, the funny thing about ghost hunting is that sometimes you'll go into a space and you'll sense something and you'll be like, there's something here, I can feel it, but it doesn't move. And it's just there in this one spot. That is an emotional imprint. We have all felt an emotional imprint. Has someone ever been in a room, you don't know what's going on, and then later You come in and you're like, what just happened in here? And then your friend or somebody says, they were just arguing, or she was just crying really hard. And you can feel that someone just died there, or that someone just cried, or that there was anger there. And you can actually decipher the emotions as you tune in. Those are emotional imprints. The difference between an emotional imprint and a ghost is that the ghost will move. The ghost will move in the room. First, it'll be in that place, and then it will be gone. And eventually, you'll be able to sense where it's moving and how it's moving in the room, or in the hallway, or on that land. Or sometimes it will kind of move around an item. It's usually large items. So, ghosts are funny beings. Some of them are meant to be here attached on Earth. I met a ranger ghost that was very attached to his land. And when he was alive, he made a promise to the land that he would always take care of it. And so when people would come in and trash it, he would get pissed off and he would do something to their vehicle. But if you came in like me and you cleaned up after the last assholes and you cleaned it up, then he was happy about it and he would protect you. Mm-hmm. Now that's how it worked. But the only reason I knew that was because I communicated with him as soon as I arrived and I listened. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what you want me to do. Okay, no problem. You're protecting this land. Okay, because that was his lifetime promise. He said he would do it forever, and he was doing it forever. Okay, be careful what you promise. And then sometimes I've met spirits. I went into this woman's house, and me and the other medium were like, this spirit was going from one room to the other, up and down these sort of attic stairs. And she just kept roaming up and down and up and down and up and down. And when we tapped into her and communicated with her, she was lost. She couldn't figure out how to die. She died like 40 years prior. So for 40 years, she was going up and down the steps and she didn't know to follow the light.
Wow.
So we just told her, follow the light up there. And she was like, well, I don't see any stairs to get to it. So we told her to reach for it. So she reached for it and she was gone. Just like that. And the person was very happy that their house was exorcised. So that's a ghost.
Yeah.
Ghosts don't usually throw things and haunt unless you have offended them. Or they're playing with your fear. So if you walk in afraid, they're going to do something to make you more afraid. Because generally ghosts are reflections, they're mirrors. So if you're afraid, it's going to scare you. If you walk in confident, they're going to go, oh, hi, how are you? And they're going to be like, oh, somebody communicates with me. Oh, hi, how are you? And then they're going to want to have a conversation with you. And then you can figure out why they're there and what they're doing. Problem is, most ghost hunters won't care if it's something undramatic, like I just described.
And they're living in the fear, like how the way that you said that, they were like they automatically came from a place of fear, and they're finding and the drama and stuff. I've lived in a house that was haunted, which really wild. In my 20s, in Albuquerque, I was in this house with my boyfriend, and we lived with his mother. And he told me before we moved in, he goes, now you're part Native, so I just want you to be warned that my sisters are too. And every night, the whole time they've lived there, they wake up out in the yard, but it's nothing. It's okay. It'll be just, you'll just come back inside. It's okay if you wake up from a nightmare. It's common. I'm like, what? And I didn't really believe in this stuff. I was like, okay, whatever. Come 3:15 every morning, you would hear up and down the hallway, you could hear footsteps. Every night you heard footsteps. And I didn't think anything of it. Well, we were 20, 21 years old. I think it was St. Patrick's Day. We had a whole bunch of green beer and stuff and sat out on the couch. 3:15, that you heard it start. You didn't see them, but you could hear and you could see the actual every morning. His mom would vacuum the hall, and then every single morning you would see these footprints up and down. I was like, okay. And I didn't really think nothing. I didn't have nightmares, nothing like that. I would get the cold. We were in like a room with all the doors shut, but it would be ice cold. And I would just, like I did as a kid, I would always just hide under the covers. Well, one time I was home all alone and I swept and mopped the kitchen and I pushed all the chairs up under the table. And I went into the bedroom. And when I came back, they were all out along all of the doorway, the walls. And I left. I left after that because I was like, well, they can't move anything. They can't do anything. We're good. But after that, it was fear. It totally. And his mother, what she ended up doing, she had like in the 70s had actually called the mediums, and the psychic in Arizona University came. They documented the Santa Fe Trail ran underneath her home, and there was a family there that had been massacred by the natives, and a child was born, a baby was buried there. They were protecting the baby and their riches. The gentleman had buried a trunk by the baby or something, and he would be seen walking on top of the garage. Often people would see him, the neighbors would see him and stuff. But the mother, what I thought was interesting, exactly like Hollis said, was his mom finally made a pact because the energy got crazy. The currences were crazy. The baby's bones actually did come up. They buried it, did a proper thing. So the mom said, okay, my family has had enough. I promise, as long as I live, nobody's going to dig for your treasure. Nobody's going to disturb this land, this house. Nothing will be disturbed. Everything is safe here. And everything stopped. Like there was, it all just stopped. I don't know what happened after she passed, but the children, and they'd lived in that house for 20 years. I guess all of the girls had had nightmares their whole lives. They all left at 18 to get out. So yeah, I'd had, and that was part of, I'd had experiences like that a lot of my life. I'd go to ruins. My dad, we go to battlefields and Indian ruins and places like that. And I always could see, but mine was different. I would see, I'm not still not positive to this day if I was time traveling or just if it was the energetic imprint of these places, because I would actually see like the cliff dwellings, the Anasazi cliff dwellings and stuff. I would see fully functional, like the people going about their daily lives and stuff. So cool experiences.
So yeah, so there's lots of stories.
Yeah.
And I know for me, but
I don't believe they can harm you. Like you're in control. Oh, you're muted. We just heard you a second ago.
hold on, sorry, I
There you
changed
go.
something.
I can hear you.
So what I wanted to say was that, I was hired as a caregiver in a mansion. I'm not sure, it was built after the Revolutionary War, and the original deed was signed by President Washington.
Oh, wow.
And they were trying to get all the stories out of the house, but the woman that owned it, she had a brother who had Downs, and he was like 58. And so they hired me to take care of him. But the reason that she hired me was because she also knew I was a medium. Because when I came into the house, I was like, okay, so I get to live here? Okay. Now, I was a medium and I was working as an exorcist, and I was like, I'm going to have to exorcise this house. But what I found out was in the center of the house, there were 2 mirrors directly across from each other that are about, I think they're about 100 foot high, and they were old ancient mirrors from like the 1700s, and the spirits would move. Now look, I at first was like, are they all ghosts? Are they all attached? Now sometimes during like Christmas time, for instance, there would be old energies coming through, and they would be all dressed like it was the 1800s, and
They're
they'd
going
be
to the ball.
partying in this house, this mansion
Wow.
that was in the center of the community and known for doing that. And at the time I was like, are they all ghosts? Now, I was a new fresh baby medium, and they were like, no, we're not all ghosts. We're actually, some of us are spirits. But
Also, they
the mirrors created a vortex so that they could be seen and heard easier.
wow.
And we had all kinds of seances and experiences, and I have stories that go on and on. After living there for so many years, and then having Eddie, the guy who had Down syndromes, he developed dementia. If you know anything about dementia, they cross halfway over to the other side. And it's very normal for people with Downs to develop dementia early in their 50s. And so he did. And
Wasn't there someone
he would
just
come
the other-
down and talk to me and
Wow.
tell me that his mom was just up in his room. And of course, his mom had died many years earlier.
There was somebody just the other day on the page who had the similar, someone in their family has Downs with dementia and was having
Oh,
experiences. Do you remember reading that? It was
no, I
just
must have missed it.
recently. Yeah, it was just like in the last few days, and they were
Yeah.
talking to, I think they said the loved one was in the truck, and they kept saying that they're out in the truck or something like that. But yeah, this young man was, I don't think he
And
was
they
out.
probably really are.
Yeah, and I said, yeah, because I know that they automatically are sensitive, and so I was, yeah,
Right.
that's really
So, yeah, something about Downs, they're very connected to people on the other side. So, I'm sorry about dementia.
cool.
Anyone with dementia is very connected to the spirits on the other side, period. Okay. So now let's get on with a couple other questions. How can you tell the difference between a dream and a visitation? It's actually quite easy. If the dream is something like he died again, or very negative emotions,
Mhm.
that's your brain processing grief. If you're elated and you're
You've-
like, oh my gosh, I love you, and the two of you go skipping down the beach, that's probably a visitation. And that's how you know the difference.
Your heart
Would you
knows
guys
the
agree?
difference. Yes, yes, your heart definitely knows. It's a beautiful connection that you'll feel, and it's not a traumatic, like exactly like you said, it's not the reliving or the trying to figure out why or any of that. It's just a beautiful experience of comfort and love. Yeah, you totally agree.
Right. And Marty said, my husband once said something. This is funny. Okay. My husband once said something about a headstone that he didn't mean to be insulting, but the spirit, we believe, took it that way. We got this light as soon as he said it. So there's a picture. There's a picture in the chat. If you're in Zoom, you can look at it. And I can see why he said that the headstone looks like a phallus. And then there's a red light in the background. Yes, if you offend the spirit, they'll probably get pissed off. But I will say,
But it's more
most
like a,
spirits are not in a cemetery.
no, that's more like a what the fuck? What did you really? That's what I'm getting. Like he was a jokester, like really? You could
Yeah,
find
yeah.
nothing else but that.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, I know I hang out in
Yeah.
cemeteries.
Mhm.
they have very little spirits in them.
Mhm.
Most spirits don't want to hang out at the cemetery.
No, they're
I
not.
also sometimes have known some spirits that in life they were a bit of pranksters and may have had a little bit of a off-color sense of humor, and so that light might have been kind of like, yep, an acknowledgement as well, because the spirit may have looked at that headstone and gone, yep, that looks like a phallus.
There is a red light, which does indicate pissed off, but who knows? I would have had to sense it. So, all right. Well, I'm glad everybody got a few questions in. And how are you feeling, Bright Hawk? Would you like to offer a little story?
Sure. I'm trying to decide if I want to do instrumentation at the same time, but it complicates things.
Bright Hawk is
But
actually
it
a
also-
really talented storyteller.
it
Yes,
enhances
she
things
is.
too.
We want to hear about what was she going to tell us earlier, and we were holding off.
Oh yeah.
Was it
Well, we'll
God's
get into that later after
Okay.
this story.
Okay. I gotta take my medicine.
I could see from high atop the dragon's back that as the dragon walked forward, and they would occasionally breathe fire. And when the dragon breathed fire, it would light up our way, but it would also light up the dragon's body. And I could see the dragon had all kinds of interesting scars, but they were beautiful. They glowed. And every once in a while, the dragon would limp a little bit. And it had been a long day. I couldn't blame anyone for feeling a little weary at this point. And as the evening started to come on, and the dragon would breathe fire, and their scars would glow, I began to wonder. I began to wonder about how did the dragon's scars glow so beautifully? And not being able to control my curiosity any further, I asked, "Dragon, please tell me, I'm quite curious. Your body, you have some incredible scars, but they're beautiful. They glow with such beauty. How do your scars glow with such beauty?" We dragons, we've been slain so many times before. I can't tell you how many times we've been slain, but we rise again. You see, my scars, they're the source of my magic and strength. In fact, my scars glow beautifully because I've learned to transform the voices in the scars. The voices in the scars, I asked? I'm not sure I understand. Oh, but you see, the scars, they have such power in them, but they speak with crooked voices. Here, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, the dragon began, there was a great samurai warrior. And the samurai warrior had two giant swords on either side of their belt, and they approached a very holy monk. And the monk was sitting peacefully in their orange robes, and the samurai warrior came up to the monk and said, "Oh, Holy Father, tell me, monk, What is the difference between heaven and hell? The monk looked up at the warrior and said, "What is the difference between heaven and hell? I cannot tell you. You are too ugly." Oh, the samurai is so mad. He pulls out one of the swords. And the peaceful little monk says, "Oh, and you are stupid too." Oh, the monk pulls out the other sword, ready to chop this little monk's head off. And the monk looks very peacefully at the samurai and says, "That is hell." And the samurai warrior drops the swords, realizes what the monk has said, drops to his knees. "Thank you." And the monk looks and says, "Gratitude, that is heaven." "You see," said the dragon, "the voices that get us, the voices that tell us we're stupid, we're ugly, and that reject us, where we can't believe we're worthy of love, when we forget who we really are, when we listen to those voices, we have to transform them and remember who we are. Take a breath and feel and remember who you are. Asking a better question is the beginning. For you see, all of us go on quests, but great quests begin with great questions. How can I learn more? How can I serve? What am I really here to do? Those are the questions worth contemplating. And when you transform those voices, then your scars will glow beautifully too. And I realized what the dragon was trying to tell me, and that I needed to listen to all the voices in me, not just the loudest ones, but the quietest ones that say, "Yes, yes, do that, go that way. Yes, you know. Yes, you know what to do, and do it." And that, my friends, is the beginning of finding great quests. Thank you.
Well done, Red Hawk. Thank you. I love that story because I think all of us that have moved through like Sarah's story and Cheryl's story and Jamie's story, when we move through those wounds of losing someone that we lost or start to master talking to the other side, even though we lost someone, it's a different way. It's a way to transform your scars. And I think that's why that story is super special. Because that's what we're doing, right? We're here to transform our scars. So I just wanted to address Maureen, who said, "I think my son visited me on my dream. I asked him, 'Are you coming home?' And he said, 'Yeah, we're trying to have another baby and hoping the baby will be him again, like reincarnation.' Do you guys think that is what he meant by saying yeah?" Absolutely, Maureen. Yep. And I'll tell you what, I don't know how your son passed exactly, but sometimes children are reborn very quickly because they're angels, and angels don't have to wait around for things. So they'll just come right back for whatever reason. Um, and sometimes it's meant to happen that way because you have to like more deeply love the second child. I know a woman that lost her first child, and she was really upset of that, of course. But then she had two more, and she's had to love those two children really deeply because of what they're going through, because they're like struggling with drugs and alcohol and things like that. All right, Sarah, let's put you up here.
I just wanted to, because I saw Maureen's question as well. And your question, it hit home for me. I'm in the same boat with my son. For him, I started off with automatic writing. That was our first contact. And I asked him the same question, and he said yes. So, like you, I'm in the process of trying. But the thing I want to say to you and your husband or your partner is believe. I know trying for a baby, especially after a loss of your child, your baby, no matter how old your son was, mine was 20. You just have to believe without a doubt that, you know what, this is going to happen. And when that baby's born, you'll love it just as much. I know that's a scary thing too. I'm not too sure if you thought about that, but that was a big thing for me. I've been on so many journeys these last 3 years. My grief journey, mediumship journey, and also now, and I don't share with a lot of people, but my pregnancy journey, that trying to conceive. So I just want to say I'm sending all my love and light to you and everyone else here, but have faith, it'll happen. And you'll love that baby like no other because it'll be your baby. So good luck.
I also would like to say, that sometimes spirits on the other side don't know timing, and they could absolutely come through and be your grandchild.
Mhm.
And let me just say, I don't know that. Well, there's a difference between your child and your grandchild. I have two grandkids and I have a kid. He's 31. I have two grandkids. And the relationship with them is different. You would think that it would be deeper with my son. And in some ways it is, but it's also deeper with my grandchildren. It's just different. I'm not sure you could compare one with the other. Anyway, let's get to the little story that I promised I would share. Travel, if you ever get to go to England, I strongly suggest that you visit Glastonbury and Avebury. Stonehenge, I mean, if it's a bucket list, throw it in there. But it's so tourist trappy and you can't touch the stones. It's not that it lost its energy, it's just different. So we went to Glastonbury, which is a very special, cool little magical town with lots of history. And there's this cool well there where people have been praying for thousands of years, where this water sort of drips out of nowhere. And the water drips out and it's like sacred, and you can take some home. We drank some, and it's where thousands of people, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people probably for thousands of years pray. It's considered sacred water. And the whole town, no matter what shop you go into, is magical. Mystics and magic everywhere. And you can go in the Avebury, um what's it called? The Abbey. You could go in the Abbey, which is where King Arthur and his wife's grave were. I'm not a big history buff. It's just not my thing. I don't really pay attention to it. I don't usually know stuff. But then, a couple days later, we went to Avebury. By the way, we drove in the UK in a camper van, which is an experience I'll share in a different story. And Avebury is this huge stone circle that is complete, or mostly. It was more complete, and now it's not because of the Romans. But in the middle of the stone circle, is a road and a town called Avebury. And you can walk around these stones, you can touch them, you can meditate on them, you can talk to them. And I started, so, we came in and we did the welcome center thing and just went into the stones to the closest spot. And as I started contacting them, I could kind of feel that there were some spirits and energies around the stone circle. And I didn't really want any that were what I would call younger, from like the 1900s or the 1800s. I was like, oh no, I'd be more interested in the ancient being. So the ancient being walked with me, and he was telling me what the meaning of all the stones were. Okay. And so I just kind of knew what they were, like community, growth, fertility. And I just started saying these words out loud as we went from stone to stone. And now Brighthawk's with me. And at some point, we get around and there's like fences and stuff to keep, I don't know, you from falling into the road. I don't know. But there's fences. They're very, they feel like they cut things off. And so we're walking towards the road. And I'm like, oh, so we're supposed to go in the town and have lunch. And Brighthawk's like, okay. So we start to walk into the town, and I have no idea where we're going to eat lunch. I don't even know what's in this town. Okay, I don't know. I have no idea. Brighthawk can vouch for that. I'm clueless when it comes to these things. And so I'm walking into the town, and I'm like, oh, we have to go over here. Because the spirit, the ancient being walking with me, is telling me where to go. He's like, make a right. Okay, go over there to that white building. And I'm like, the Red Lion? He's like, yeah, go in there. And I'm like, why? Why are we going in the Red Lion? Like, why do you care about the Red Lion? And he's like saying that the road is offensive because it goes right through his sacred stone circle. And it's annoying, and it constantly has this energy going through the middle of the. And of course, it's tourists. There's tourists everywhere. But it's not too bad because it's a weekday. And we go into the restaurant. And right in front of me, I knew he was like, you're going to seat yourself. As soon as I come in, it says, please seat yourself. He's like, make a left and then make a left. So, okay. Now, this is an old-fashioned England inn. restaurant bar. There's little hallways that go all over the place. There's seating over here. I don't know what's over here because I have to make a left. And so I make a left, and then I make a left, and he's like, sit right there. And I look down, and there's a well. And I was like, wow. So I just sat down, and I'm like, there's a well. And it has like glass over top, and it's a well made into a table. So, by the way, there's no waiters or waitresses here. And he tells me I have to go up and place my order. So I'm just looking at the well, and he's like, oh, you'll meet him in a minute. I'm like, okay. So me and Bright Hawk figure out what we want. I go up to the bar, place my order. They bring it to you, but there's no waiter to come and take your order. So then I come back to sit down. And all of a sudden, there's a spirit sitting on the edge of the well. And I can sense him and see his outline. And he's laughing his ass off. He is laughing. Okay. And I was like, why are you laughing? What is going on here? He's like, oh, I was so drunk I fell in the well. And if you read the like engraving around the well, it says circa 1666 or some 1616 or something. Wasn't that many sixes. And then at the bottom, it says some poor soul lost his life in the well. I'm like, yeah, he sure did. And he's laughing at me. And he's like, I'm so glad you're here. That guy brought you in. And he's referring to the ancient being. And I'm like, okay. You know, and he's just like, I like to mess with people and la 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 and all this other stuff. And I'm like, And I go to the bathroom and I'm coming back out, and there's this big chalkboard for the restaurant. The most haunted restaurant in the UK. I'm like, you think? And I somehow landed there. So I go sit back down, and after a couple minutes, the bartender, and so the guy's telling me that he's gonna mess with me. Bartender comes up and he's like, I'm sorry, but something happened to your card. I didn't even fall for it. I was like, okay, no problem. I'll just give you another card. So I went up there, paid for our dinner, and I was like, did it go through this time? He's like, And I'm like, okay, good. And I'm thinking that's because the spirit's messing with me. We come back, and he sits there with us the entire meal. And I'm just saying all this stuff to Bright Hawk, and she's like, most interesting way you could visit Avebury. And I'm like, okay, so now the rest of the day we have to visit the other half of the circle, but the ancient being is saying skip over one part of the circle. So we go out there after lunch, and we're walking around, and as I'm standing up on this hill with Bright Hawk, I can look out and I see very clearly that it had been destroyed. Now, let me back up a little bit, because after we left the Red Lion, the ancient being made me enter in a certain place at a certain gate that went out into the road, because this is where it all began, he said. This is where we just raised one stone because we wanted to mark this area so we would have access to that well. But the well wasn't built up when we were alive. They did that in the 1600s. And I was like, oh. So, but before, it was a well in the ground. And he just walked me through each stone and explained how they used it because they were nomadic people. They would use it to kind of mark this area as sacred, and they had a lot of problems with like diseases and dirty water and things like that. So they wanted to make sure they were always coming back to the same place because it was healed and sacred. And eventually it became a tradition, and eventually it also became sacred. And as we entered to the next part, Bright Hawk was like, she wanted to go up on this hill. So we went up on this hill, and I could see out that a quarter of the stone circle was gone.
Wow.
And he said the Romans destroyed it. Oh. And so I tell this to Bright Hawk, and she's like, I don't know. It's probably true. I don't know. And so then we checked out the place where they would sort of walk in, and he hung out with me until I got right to the edge of the circle. And when it was time to leave and I started walking to the parking lot, bam, he was gone.
Yeah.
Why? Because he was attached to the land.
Yeah. To the
And even though he was communicating with me and hanging out with me, and I allowed him to enter my body, he wasn't in me. And this is something you should always remember. When a spirit is attached to a land or a house or something like that, they can't really hang out on you. Anyway, so that was my trip to Avebury. It was a very special place. It was pretty cool, hanging out with the sheep and the stones and the ancient being.
That's
And
cool.
the crazy ghost hanging out on the well. It just kept laughing at me. um, Stephanie asked a question. I think we can all probably answer this. Do you see them as though they are next to you or as an image in my head? It depends, Stephanie.
Mhm.
It depends. Sometimes I do. When I'm doing readings, sometimes they do appear to me physically. But usually it's when I close my eyes. So it is kind of an image in my head. But I'll still
Yeah.
see them. And sometimes they don't appear to me at all. They just give me images to communicate with you, especially in a reading. How's it go for you guys?
Yeah. That's kind of mine is I see them like in my head, like how you said in my head, but I also sometimes like if you book a reading ahead of time, they're here. But I don't necessarily see them. I'll just get messages or images and stuff, and I just jot them down. Like I'll take notes and things like that. Um, that's how it is for me. It's hard to describe because I'll see the person, but I always see like them in like their highest self is how they describe it to me. So it's hard to describe.
How I see them, it kind of, I can just, when they first come, they step forward, they really show me what they look like in life. So I'm able to tell you how tall they were, their hair color, how they styled their hair. Interesting enough, like Cheryl, sometimes they'll come earlier before the meeting. I notice those ones are like the strongest with they really want that
Mhm.
connection. A little funny story. So one of my first readings with Psychic Insights, I was preparing. I like to do yoga before a reading, and I could sense a female spirit. And as I'm in the downward facing dog, I see this older lady. She has really long, like her hair is white, long, and she's looking at me like this, and she's like, hello. So that was really interesting. For me personally, so I don't have an imagination. When I close my eyes, and if you tell me to say, I don't know, picture a red ball, I close my eyes, there's nothing. But it's interesting how detailed I can get when your loved ones come through. For me, it's like a knowing. It's like recalling a memory.
Yeah.
It's how I just can describe them. It's as if I'm looking at them like as I'm looking at you right now, but I don't necessarily see them in the traditional sense. It's more of I knew them from before without knowing them. I know that sounds really confusing, but that's kind of how I see or how I experience would be a better way to put it.
Cool. I think I have seen you do that, Sarah. I've seen you describe people very sort of.
For me, it varies. For me, it varies because sometimes it's more an image in my head. Sometimes it's a just an aura, and sometimes it's seeing them, as they were, or variations of them. But I've had some times where I've seen some pretty solid forms. I For those of you who don't know where I'm at, I'm in Lancaster County. I had lived in Cumberland County in Pennsylvania. This area is the area where the Revolutionary War, some of that took place in, and the Civil War, some of that took place in this area. So there are spots where you'll be driving along and you'll actually be seeing, horses and soldiers and things like that along the roads, and that at night. It's like echoes in some ways where it may not be fully solid type of thing. But there are some that seem pretty darn solid, and it's almost like you got to do a double take because you're not sure if there's something ahead of you on the road or not, type of deals. And there was one I particularly remember, which was a football player. It appeared to be like someone who would be maybe in high school or something. But the thing that was disturbing was the football player had his head under his arm, type of thing. He was in a football type jersey and padding, had the head under the arm. And I was like, what the? And then as soon as I saw it and said that, it was like he lost his head in an auto accident up there. Okay. But and that was before I was doing any of the professional mediumship. I was just, living with being a medium. But those kind of things, you really when you have the solid ones like that, can be a little bit overwhelming at times, because it's like you're going along about your business, and all of a sudden it's like you're seeing something that doesn't make sense. And we've had other things happen in Lancaster City as well, which this whole area is quite haunted.
In fact, that's where I've done some of the ghost hunting there and in Maryland. Do you want to say something? Oh, I have to speak up. Can you guys hear me?
A little soft.
Yeah, they can all hear me. Okay, I don't know. What about walk-ins and thoughts on that? So what I have a lot of thoughts on that, because I've studied with people that do walk-ins professionally, or trance mediumship, or possession, whatever you want to call it. I used to actually do that.
Wow.
They do that in Santeria and Voodoo. In Santeria, usually the group will have a couple of mediums that are sort of appointed to be the medium that night. And then there's usually one or two people that are sort of space holders. And we make sure that that medium can come and go into their body in an appropriate way. And The one thing that I've learned in that experience on both sides, on both being the person being possessed and being the grounding person, is you have to give permission. If you didn't give permission, that spirit is not in your head. That spirit is not on you. They might be hanging out with you, but they did not walk in. You are not possessed unless you have given permission. Can you inadvertently give permission? Sometimes, especially if you're sloppy with your words, where you're like, well, I don't mind if the spirit steps in. Yeah, well, you might not want to always say that. Okay. And I know that my guides won't let a spirit come in unless I specifically say yes. In fact, spirits aren't even allowed to communicate with me unless I take my hat off and I am open to it. They can't even communicate with me. They can't even tap. They can tap me, like on the city streets. Somebody's died on the city streets, and this is the other reason I hate being in the city. They'll tap me, and I'm like, get out of here. And then sometimes I'll be like, okay. And sometimes they just need help. They just need to know which way to go. They don't know how to die sometimes. It happens a lot with people that have no belief on the other side, is what I found. Or they have no belief about the other side. Okay, so walk-ins, essentially, you have to give them permission. If you've given them permission, you might want to make sure that you only do that when someone is around to help ground you out, so that when you come back, you're fully back. And because you can be a little confused, you can be a little sort of in between the two places and not completely yourself. But then there are some people that suffer from, well, I don't want to say suffer, but maybe they've been diagnosed with things like schizophrenia
I
or
think that's gifts. 'Cause I used to work
yeah,
in
I'm
institutions.
going there, Cheryl. I'm
Yeah,
going
I
there.
know. I'm so sorry, but I love to hear somebody else
BPD.
agree. Thank you. Like,
Yeah, BPD, I think
mhm.
is what it's called. And those people actually have a really strong gift, and they naturally move from dimension to dimension. And sometimes they'll become a different person and they'll blame it on a spirit. But really, they have a special gift and they don't really understand what's happening. And they may not want you to know they've been diagnosed with those things, or they haven't been diagnosed yet. But what I will say is you will not do something completely out of integrity while you have a spirit in you, unless you are diagnosed with BPD or schizophrenia, then you might. But most people their body stays in this dimension and your brain stays in this dimension. But people with those disorders, they don't. And they have a lot of they are in a different dimension while they're talking to you.
Yeah.
And you think they're in this dimension, but they're not. And they're actually talking to a different version of you in a different dimension. So that you might be a murderer in a different dimension. And if they think that they are going to hurt you or something, then they are. Believe what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because whatever they're accusing you of, or whatever they see, they think you're a demon. They think, one guy used to think that I was God. And then he thought I was a priest. And he thought I was and he used to live across the street from me. And he'd be like, don't see what I'm doing. I'm evil and stuff like that. He didn't want me to see him. Okay. And I was like, what the heck? But he had schizophrenia. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a difference. A person with schizophrenia and BPD will sometimes have these kinds of experiences and blame it on a spirit walking in. And sometimes that's kind of true. See, Patricia? Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So, can he experience walk-ins? Yes. Without giving permission? Yes. Because he could give permission in a different dimension
And not realize it. Yeah.
and not know that he did it. Okay. And that's with schizophrenia and BPD. Okay. So the last thing here, do you want to say something? Do you want to add something, Cheryl, to that?
No, I just find it fascinating because I used to work in the institutions and stuff, and I always swore that the people, some of them were
Yeah.
so gifted because I'd be sitting there and I would have an experience and they'd be like, hi, John. Like I would sense a spirit going by or something, and they would be talking to them. They'd have on full covers. I was like, whoa, like it happened so many times. And I've never heard another medium's take on that because I've never had somebody else that's kind of walked that same path. So it's absolutely validating for me because I went to my professor quite a few times. I'm like, and he figured out that I was a medium way before me. Like I went to him a few times and I was like, dude, there's this, because a bunch of the places and the facilities, they're extremely haunted because people pass in the institutions quite often. Like it was insane. But yeah, I definitely, and as far as walk-ins, I've known mediums that do that and stuff. Me, no permissions granted. Nope, nope. And I'm lucky when I do the forensics and things like that, missing cases and stuff like that. My guys really protect me. That I've only seen like actual blood in 2 cases, and it was needed to help solve the case. But other than that, like I'll see the scenes and stuff, but I'm not one who feels the pain, thank goodness. And I don't see like the gruesome details, but I will see like evidence, like where the evidence is, and I'll see the scene. But my guys are very protective over me, and I'm very thankful for that. So
when you work with your guides, it tends to work a little bit better.
yeah.
Okay. Last thing is Michelle said, do we know why we're drawn to certain animals? For instance, my brother who passed and myself love dragons. Brighthawk's story with the dragon was awesome. Okay, let's bring Brighthawk into this. We both got dragon tattoos, different styles. I've always been drawn to dragons. Well, I think it's simple as that's like your totem animal, right? Does anyone else have any other? It's like your totem animal.
Exactly. For myself, I've always been drawn to ravens and crows and bumblebees when I was a child. Would scare my mom because in our front lawn, they had clovers. And I would sit right in the middle of all these bees. And my family kind of teases me, but if we get a wasp or a bumblebee, I'll just ask it to leave, like to fly out the window. The other day I had a cup and my family's like freaking out because there's a wasp. And I was holding the cup and I said, can you go in here, please? And it flew in. I took it outside. Since my son's passed, so I know everyone normally spiders freak them out, but what I learned, spiders are very powerful for connecting the spirit world to our world. So I use spiders to help me connect. And so my house has abundance of spiders. My family hates it, but I'm not scared of them. My son, though, just spiders were nope. So even now I see him like when I call the spiders, he's just like standing there and he's looking, he's like, no, 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 no. He's still like, nah. I just want to share, interestingly enough, when I asked my son for a specific sign, I asked him last winter, I said, can you send me a raven and have it call out 4 times? Traditionally, from my culture, it's the 4 directions. It's very powerful. And I was sitting in my bedroom and I heard the wings flapping first. And then I heard caw. I opened my bedroom curtains and there's this giant raven. It called out 3 more times and then flew away. Also, traditionally, ravens and crows, they are known to bring your prayers into the spirit world. So I do call on them a lot. But yes, I do strongly believe animals, they're a strong connection.
Michelle, if you notice, she wrote about the dragon tattoos, right? And the very first thing I was like, oh, well, it's time to journey with the dragons, is what I got. The very first message I got, well, you need to journey with the dragons. Well, then if you look her next message, it said, is that why we see dragonflies? Dragonflies. Hello. Yes. So much validation, and he's so spot on the way that he's presenting it to you. And with the music of Bright, the story and everything, like, yeah. If you don't take that, those aren't coincidences, Michelle. That's love. That's pure love. That's transcending everything.
Here's my little skinny on belief. What does it get you to not believe?
Exactly.
It brings you nothing. It brings you misery. It brings you believing that you never got a sign.
Mm-hmm.
But if you believe you did, then what does that bring you? It brings you happiness, contentment, and peace.
Oh.
Well, why the hell wouldn't you believe? What do you got to lose? Happiness?
Exactly.
For me, it's the wolf and the dragon are the two that resonate strongly with me. And I tend to wonder with the wolf if some of that has to do with the fact that I got bit by a dog when I was a child. We had been looking at moving onto a farm, and they apparently lengthened the chain that the watchdog there was on. And so the pattern where his chain had been was far shorter than where it was at that point. And I was maybe 6 years old at the time. And my mom was holding my brother because my brother was only about 2. And there was another family that had been supposed to move onto the farm with us. And they had just arrived and they yelled at, watch out for the dog. And I froze just as the dog attacked. And I was wearing my favorite dress at the time. It was a white confirmation style dress. Or communion dress or whatever you would want to call those, or the kind that you would wear as a flower girl. But I've often wondered if my association with the wolf has anything to do with having gotten bitten by the dog, because that particular dog had a lot of wolf characteristics in his facial features and his build. Don't know, but I tend to look at wolves as being a guide. And over the years, a bat has now been added to my spirit animal guides. Oftentimes, there may be encounters we have in our lives that bring us closer to certain animal guides, at least for a time, if not on a permanent basis.
Yeah, I've had those experiences quite a few times. My son and I see, it's really cool. We've seen a white wolf, but we've seen this white wolf in Ohio, Florida, and New Mexico. just on the side of the road when we were together, driving in the middle of nowhere, picking wildflowers, and a large white wolf, like very large. Yeah, so I've had that, and mine's also red-tail hawk and tortoise. So yeah, I'm very
Bright hawk.
elemental.
Why do they call you Bright Hawk?
Yes, I want to know.
Well, they call me Bright Hawk because I'm a bright light born on a dark night. I was born at 20 to 12 midnight on 12/20, the longest night of the year, winter solstice.
Oh,
So, Hawk, messenger of spirit, and bright light born on a dark night, and that's why they call me Bright Hawk.
oh, I love
So, the other reason why my background looks like it does is because for me, music, creativity, art, and I'm sure Jamie would agree with this, is very much how I pray, how I connect, how I channel spirit. And so I committed this year, since my things had changed a great deal, to um, to doing a canvas every month.
Oh my gosh.
So that's
Oh.
my little buddy, one of my little buddies,
It-
and different.
Yes.
Go
Oh,
back one.
I love
This
that.
that one really was because honestly, that was all about feeling stressed and the world and the condition of the world. It was when the first craziness happened with Trump, the Trump Biden, the last election. And I was like, I don't want to think about it. What can I do to make my world bigger? Paint the
Yeah.
universe, the Milky Way.
Beautiful.
I love that.
And most recently, and this is what I did for the van, because this is the screen we look at basically when we're in the van. So it's sort of our little portal into our little magic world.
I love that.
And our little buddy,
Oh,
anytime, and you could definitely come across this scene in our backyard during the spring.
wow.
So that is part of how I feel it, and
I
let
love
it.
that one.
Thank you.
I painted
Thank
a
you.
similar birch vine that I'm
Oh,
not near
this
as
one.
talented.
This is my most recent.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Beautiful.
I'm just gonna say, Bright Hawk's a really great painter,
Mm-hmm.
really great artist. If you like her
Thanks.
music,
I
or you'd
love
like to have some of her artwork,
Oh
you
yeah.
can go to her website, which I
Thank
put in
you.
the chat, and I also put it on the link if you're watching this live. Also, Bright Hawk sells. Do you have one with you there?
Oh yeah.
She makes the most awesome crystal grid you've ever seen. You will never find anything like it.
I'll never have a better
Promise.
salesperson.
Because she goes out in the woods. She collects trees that have fallen,
Oh my gosh.
slices them,
Yes, I need
It
one.
comes with crystals.
finishes them so that they don't crack,
That's
and then she
gorgeous.
paints them. And you can use those like crystal grids. So you put your stones on it, and they're really great because you can travel with it, and you can hold it in your lap and put your crystals on it and really direct your energy. And that's really the magic of a crystal grid. So I just wanted to give you guys a little heads
Well-
up. If you're working with magic, if you're working with healing, like that Om thing that she just had.
I like hers better than mine.
Oh, is it painted?
No, it's just cypress.
Just a piece of wood.
Yeah, it's
And
just
you use that as a crystal grid?
yeah, I use at the base of my grids, but I love those. Wow.
I just wanted to share
Yeah.
with Bright Hawk for a second because I was doodling the whole time. But I thought it was interesting.
There you go. Oh,
Oh,
look,
look got the little spirals.
Oh, wow.
that looks like the tree you're
Can
holding.
you put both up at the same time?
Yeah, put them up.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Oh,
Ah,
cool.
yeah, hold your drum up. Look at that. It's even, they even go the same direction too.
She has a
Oh, I
tree
love
with more
that.
spirals like that somewhere.
I love it.
That's fun. Yeah, this one's mine. Did I show? I think I already showed this one.
That's the newest one.
I love that one.
So if you're trying to like use crystals to focus your mind, to connect to the other side, to connect to your ancestors, to get your brain to calm down, to quiet your mind, that could be really helpful. And they're all painted with intention.
I have
course.
crystal grids all over my house. I have like 3 major
Do you?
grids around my house. Yes. When I had my heart attack, my husband was alone for 10 days with my crystals and stuff. And by my chair, I have a rose quartz, which is for your heart and love and stuff. And he goes, I don't know what it is about those grids. He goes, but they work. He goes, I found out they work. He was using it when I had my stent, like at the very beginning. He goes, he goes, I've never prayed so hard. I've never connected to a rock in my life. But he could
And
really feel it. It was really beautiful.
When James was in the coma, we put a big heart rose quartz in each hand,
Mm-hmm.
and he held on to those rocks all week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
powerful.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hollis has holding it. Yeah.
Yeah. Rose quartz is very powerful. And then I've used this one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What
Just
is?
everybody says this is this is a septarian generator.
Mm.
I had a gentleman who was in a coma from wrecking his Corvette, and he was ejected at 135 miles an hour. And this is how I got this was part of his major. Yeah. And when
Wow.
he woke up, what was wild, that's why I knew I could help you guys, was when he woke up. I've never met him or anything. And he wakes up and he goes, send Cheryl gifts, lots of gifts. And he knew my name and everything. It was the wildest stuff. It was so wild. Like it was my validation that I knew exactly, because we
So
never
cool.
met. And he remembered me for about 3 months. Now he doesn't remember me. It happened last October. Yeah, he doesn't have a memory of me now. That's really wild. Really wild.
Fascinating.
But yeah, super fascinating. So yes, get the grids. I'm telling you, if you, especially the hand painted like that, they work, the magic, and it'll really help with the grief in your home a lot. Like it really helps that raise the energy. If you're not able to do it yourself, let Bright Hawk assist you, and it's beautiful. It really amplifies.
It comes with stones.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Comes with like a little starter set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about Cheryl's offering, what she's talking about that she did for my son.
Mm.
Is soul retrieval.
Yeah. I
and
guess
so
that's what,
when someone's in a coma or something, she can go and try to communicate with them and bring them back
with
Okay.
permissions.
But-
And
Yeah, with permissions.
yeah,
We all have something special.
yeah.
Sarah tell you what they look like.
I love that.
And,
I love that. Like she gets so detailed too, and she'll just keep
she
going.
does.
Oh, okay. Well, wait. They keep telling her more and more. I love watching you, Sarah.
Well, thank
Uh-huh.
you. I actually
And
want to ask you, Hollis and Bright Hawk, because when we first, before the Zoom opened up and you're kind of telling us about your trip. So I did have someone stepping forward, and I don't normally draw spirit, but would you kind of recognize it? Sorry, again, I doodled.
Down a little. There you
the
go.
Viking.
Yeah. I don't know. The
Well, it could have something to do with my son. Have you seen his t-shirts?
no.
And I'm pretty sure ancestral, we probably have some sort of Viking. Do you want to grab a t-shirt, Britta? So I
So
can show
I
you
know this looks like a nose, but it's actually it's like a, you know how on those helmets they have that plate that kind of,
Yep.
I don't know what kind of protection that would do so you don't get a broken nose, but yeah, that's what I was seeing, and he was
My
holding.
son was in a coma charred because it was a drug induced coma because he had a cardiac incident. Now Brighthawk is showing um the t-shirt.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
I love that.
And before we chose this design,
That's
there was a
cool.
different design. So I'm going to be selling these t-shirts. The money goes to my son's warrior fund because he didn't have, what had happened was Medicaid had dropped his insurance, but he had gotten a blood test for this genetic heart condition. It's called HCM. And then he, about a week later, collapsed at work. And no one really knew why except for me, because he had called me and told me that he was positive for HCM. And this disease will sometimes just make people collapse. The
And you
people
may
that
not,
collapse
you may not
often,
remember this, but you told me when you called that you had seen it.
yeah, I know. I've
Yeah,
foreseen it happening. Yeah, I know.
that was for me to
And
hear. I was like, oh my goodness.
but that doesn't always mean that he'll listen to me.
Yeah, I
And
know.
then, and then, so anyway, Brighthawk had that t-shirt up, and then what happened was they put him in because it happened at work, they thought that he had lost his oxygen to his brain for a long time, but he didn't.
Thank
And
God.
anyway, I proved that it was his heart. It's very common for people with HCM to just fall out. It's called syncope.
Mhm.
And then sometimes the people that suffer from syncope also suffer from sudden death. But I knew, because of the astrology, because of what Cheryl was saying, and because of what I knew as being his mother that's a psychic, that he was not dead and he was not brain dead.
Yeah.
So I insisted they bring him out of that coma, and they did. He was not brain damaged at all, but he does have to have surgery to have a device implanted that will be sure that he doesn't suffer from sudden death. It was a warning. As I looked at the astrology, Mercury was visiting his Chiron, which is genetic disorders, telling him that he should be aware of what's about to happen. So, Sarah, I think your drawing actually is from the ancestors, because him and I, my son and I, and my dad are trying to heal a very long generation of people that suddenly die. Because this is 100% genetic condition. Athletes fall out from this condition. It doesn't matter how much you exercise, if you smoke or don't smoke, although if you do smoke, it will make it worse. But none of us did any of that. And my dad died of it, and his mother died suddenly when he was 12 years old. And you can imagine losing your parent for many generations would create generational trauma.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. That's what we're doing. That's why we're here. That's why we're alive. And I think that's an ancestor you're bringing through, Sarah.
Mhm.
Thank you for the
Many
validation.
generations back. Yeah, because we're on my dad's side. Taylor is actually one of the original settlers here, as I've told you before. that killed the indigenous people. But those people were also Vikings.
Mhm.
So we changed our name from TAILOR, because when the first settlers came here, they would name themselves what they did.
Yeah,
Taylor, TAILOR, and they changed the I to a Y because they were hiding from the queen. Okay. So that's pretty sure what that ancestor is. And it may have been the beginning of HCM, like
Yeah.
way back.
Thank you for the
So we're
validation.
healing generations. You're welcome. So that's why I told that whole story, so that you could get what's happening here. Okay, and the last special thing that I didn't get to, I was gonna feature you, Jamie.
Wait. We can't hear you.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Okay.
No, we can't hear Hollis.
Thank you.
So Jamie, can you tell us a little bit about your fabriomancy?
Fabriomancy is a divination practice that I have developed. It can be as simple as using two claws of two different colors for casting for yes and no questions, or it can be a lot more complex. I find it very useful when I have a piece of fabric that may be associated with a person, and casting that. Lighter weight fabrics are often better for this than heavy fabrics. But if you've ever just, been looking at the patterns in a piece of fabric that has fallen on the floor or is sitting in your laundry, and you happen to notice a face or a figure or something, maybe a tree, those things all can have meanings in your life and maybe signs, just like when you do tea leaf reading, you may see signs in your cup. It's very similar in that way. And it can help to guide, with more details and such when you do that. And the beautiful thing is, if you have a piece of fabric that is somehow connected with a loved one, you can ask them to help you to communicate with them that way. And so that can be a really wonderful communication tool then. And so then you may see the way it falls may have some things that may remind you of something from back when you were together with that person. Or maybe there's something that you look at and go, wait, that looks just like a map to where I'm looking to possibly move. Different things like that may appear when you cast the fabrics. And you can use one fabric or use multiple fabrics depending on how elaborate your questions and that are. Sometimes also there may be times where you would be drawing fabrics of different types more than just just a binary type of situation. And so sometimes either drawing them or when casting them by placing several, you see a broader picture.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty much wraps up our night. And tomorrow is Tuesday. So if you take a look in the group, there's a image that I'm trying to make sure that I post images that say upcoming events. So the next two upcoming events is my event tomorrow morning. I'm going to talk about the death chart, astrology death chart. It's kind of morning for me, but it's not morning for most people. There is a replay chart in the group right now, or you can go to Psychic Insights page. You could book a reading with anyone here at psychicinsights.life. And tomorrow I'll be live doing the death chart reading. I'll be talking about death charts, and I might even get time to put together. Does anyone, if you have a suggestion of a celebrity that's dead that you'd like me to show you their chart. I have to have their birth date and their death date, but you can suggest anyone with those dates on my, like, on the event. Comment with it, and I'll see if I can pull it up.
Yeah.
And I'll be doing that tomorrow. And then tomorrow night, Sarah will be doing free readings. Okay. So look out for that. And then I think Cheryl is Wednesday
Yeah, I think so.
and Jamie is Thursday.
Yay.
Okay. All right, my friends. Well, I hope we see you next time.
Have a
All
good night,
right.
everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Namaste.